Supporters of different Palestinian factions came out on the streets of Beirut today to protest Israel's campaign in Gaza. Inflamed by the news of the explosion at the hospital. They're never going to believe Israel's version of events. The security forces responded with tear gas and water cannon to keep the protesters away from the US embassy. Lebanon's precarious government fears unrest getting out of control. Earlier, the militant group Hezbollah organised a separate demonstration. They're controlled by Iran, which can decide at any time whether to open up a new front against Israel. Yesterday, 5 Hezbollah fighters were killed in an exchange of fire with the Israeli Defense Forces across the border, a warning that this war could yet escalate and expand. At the Organization of Islamic Cooperation meeting in Jeddah, Iran made its support for Hamas clear.
I express condolences to the Palestinian people and the resistance and emphasise that this crime is being committed as the Zionist entity collapses, which happened on Saturday, October the 7th, with the Great Resistance Operation. But the United States is trying to revive the collapsed Zionist entity by conducting a war against civilians.
The Saudis, previously on the brink of a deal with Israel, were careful to distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinian people.
The latest painful developments show that the international community should act responsibly and ensure the protection of Palestinian civilians and commit to international and humanitarian law without selectivity or double standards.
Security forces protected the Israeli embassy in Jordan, another country which saw demonstrations today. An Israeli ground invasion of Gaza might trigger far larger protests and risk destabilizing the region.
Well, earlier I spoke to Osama Hamdan. He is a spokesman based in Beirut for Hamas. I asked him for his reaction to the Israeli assertion that Hamas, not Israel, is to blame for the strike on the hospital.
Well, the Israelis are still lying. They have lied the first day by saying women and children were beheaded. And now they are lying by saying that the hospital was attacked by Islamic Jihad. A few minutes after the hospital was bombed, an Israeli an army spokesperson said that we warned them and some other 5 hospitals to evacuate, but they didn't done that. So they tried to change the story after 2 hours by saying this hospital was used by some militants from Hamas. But at the moment when the hospital was bombed, for more than 20 minutes before that, more than 30 minutes after that, there was no alert in Israel. There was no alarm. That means either their radars were not working, which is not true, or they are lying, which is the fact. So they have to admit that they have bombed the hospital, and they bombed that on purpose, because in the last 12 days before bombing the hospital, they attacked 57 medical centers. 57. They are lying, and they have to admit that they have done this crime, and they have to be turned to the War Crime Court.
Okay, so you're saying that they're lying, and they're saying that you're lying about this specific attack. And one of the bits of evidence they produced today in the press conference, this is the IDF I'm talking about, was an intercept of a conversation between Islamic Jihad and Hamas commanders, where they more or less admit that they'd made a mistake. Again, are you saying that that's just fabrication, or is that something that you take seriously?
Well, it's not a conversation. It's a fake conversation.
Let me just, the reason why we're here and the reason why you're talking to me is still because of the events that happened on the October the 7th. Now, I spoke to Israeli first responders yesterday. These are the people who go in and they discover the bodies. It's a charity. It's volunteer work. And the scenes of brutality, of the aftermath of slaughter of innocent civilians that they described are profoundly shocking. Disemboweling, in some cases, few cases, beheading, the burning of children, their hands tied behind their backs. What is your response to these appalling acts of slaughter that were carried out by your men?
Well, I believe they are lying. This is a big lie created by them. They built this country on the blood of the Palestinians. They have to remember the bloodshed. Excuse me.
Let's set aside the rhetoric for one side.
No,
there
I
are
can't put the
pictures, there are
history
photographs,
aside.
there is documentary evidence. Are you saying that they staged all this?
Excuse me, I can't put the history aside, because if they are lying all the time, why to believe them today?
Do you regret?
You are not
do
getting
you
my
regret
point.
the
You are not getting my
slaughter
point.
of Israeli civilians? Because many people I've
You are
spoken
not
to
getting
here
my point.
believe that what you did
You
on
are
October the 7th has set your cause, the Palestinian cause, back by decades.
You are not getting my point. I'm not talking about history. I'm talking about the lies. I am telling you that they were lying all the time. Don't buy it now. I will not buy it now. I will not accept it now.
Okay. President Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, has called on Hamas to release the hostages, the 190 or so hostages. Why don't you release them?
I didn't hear that from President Abbas.
But why don't you just release the hostages? It would be the humane thing to do.
There is no hostages. There is war prisoners.
They're prisoners of war.
And there is foreigners.
They're innocent civilians, most of them. There are soldiers, but many of them, scores of them, are innocent civilians.
If someone is killing me,
we saw the pictures of civilians yesterday.
Taking my lands, taking my lands, I will resist.
The Israelis say they want to eliminate Hamas. If and when they eliminate Hamas, who is going to run the Gaza Strip?
Well, they have said that before, several times. They couldn't do that. The main problem is the occupation. The resistance will be continued unless the occupation is ended.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Osama Hamdan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I've also been speaking to the United States Congressman Seth Moulton, who's an Iraq war veteran, and I began by asking him about President Biden's wording that last night's hospital blast was committed by the other team, and why he might have said that.
Well, he would say that if he has convincing evidence that that's the case, and we've heard these reports. I cannot tell you at this moment that that's been confirmed, but I'm expecting to get a classified briefing myself shortly, where we hope to get to the bottom of what happened that led to this devastating loss of life.
So has he seen anything that hasn't been presented to the public by the IDF, by the Israeli army?
I guarantee you he has. American intelligence is watching the situation unfold very carefully here. And although we have intelligence sharing with the Israelis, we also have just our own intelligence that we gather on the situation as it's going on. And the president sounded quite confident that he has seen some of that classified information. Obviously, this will be one of the first questions that we ask when we go into this congressional classified briefing for the House Armed Services Committee in a few minutes.
It's extremely rare for an American president to fly into a hot situation like this one in Israel in the middle of a conflict. Do you think that this day trip has been worth it?
I think that's the kind of leadership that President Biden is showing the rest of the world. There's a lot of criticism of America right now. Some of it is well-founded. I'm standing here in the House of Representatives without a Speaker of the House. It's the first time in our nation's history that that's happened. But there's still an awful lot of good that's coming out of America, a lot of important things, important leadership that we provide the rest of the world. And that is what President Biden is showing.
But America gives billions of dollars in financial and military aid to Egypt, for instance. The Egyptian president didn't want to meet President Biden. Surely that kind of cash at least buys you, a face-to-face meeting with the Egyptian president, and it didn't happen.
Well, look, diplomacy is complicated, and it's especially complicated in the Middle East, as I learned myself, spending years there fighting as a U.S. Marine in Iraq. You can have a very close friends who say different things behind the scenes than they say in public. Obviously, the Arab leaders thought that in the wake of this tragedy at the hospital, it was important for them to show solidarity with their people who are so upset at what's going on. That doesn't mean the Egyptians aren't talking to President Biden or to the Americans or to our other allies.
But these are America's friends, Egypt and Jordan, the Palestinian Authority. The fact that you're not meeting them at all or can only meet them behind closed doors or on the telephone, it does show you the limits of American influence in this region, doesn't it?
You know, look, this is just the nature of complex diplomacy across the globe. I think the Arab leaders there felt like they had to, do this today. But that doesn't mean that they're not talking with us and they're not going to meet with the president at some time in the future.
As you said, you're a former serving Marine. You sit on the Armed Services Committee in Congress. Do you think that Israel's land invasion of the Gaza Strip, assuming that it still goes ahead, is a good idea?
Well, look, Israel has a right to address this threat. And part of addressing a terrorist threat is taking out the terrorists. I mean, that's part of any counterinsurgency campaign, which is essentially what Israel is getting into here. But it's much more complex than that. And one of the first lessons that America learned in Iraq and Afghanistan is you have to have a plan for the day after. Simply assaulting Gaza is going to be extraordinarily difficult for the Israeli Defense Forces. I've fought in an urban environment like that. I mean, they're going to take tremendous casualties just trying to go in and kill terrorists. If they kill a lot of civilians, as a byproduct of trying to take out Hamas, they're actually going to recruit more terrorists to the cause. That ultimately is counterproductive. So how Israel actually carries out this operation and what vision they have for the future of Gaza, what vision the people of Gaza who don't want to support Hamas can look forward to, that is essential to their success. And I have yet to hear them articulate what that is.
And that's crucial, isn't it? Because my question was, is it a good idea as far as we know at the moment? And what I'm hearing for you is no.
Well, it's not that simple. Again, I mean, it is certainly a good idea to take out the terrorists who perpetrated these attacks. But that's not it. You have to have a plan for what comes next. And that's the piece that I think Israel really needs to develop. And they need to share that with allies like us and you, but also with the people of Gaza. They have to paint a future that the people of Gaza can look forward to instead of supporting Hamas. That's how you ultimately win this fight. General McChrystal, who's a famed American general, estimated this insurgent math, he called it, which he said was 10 to 1. For every one innocent civilian that you kill, you recruit about 10 terrorists to the cause. So, I mean, that's tough math, and that paints the picture of how difficult this operation is going to be for Israel.
So just in 10 seconds, by that calculation, 3,000 dead Palestinians in Gaza, most of them civilians, they've recruited 30,000 new terrorists, in your language.
Well, first of all, where's your evidence that they're mostly civilians? I mean, if you're just listening to
That's according to the Gaza Health.
I mean, you don't know. I mean, right? I mean, Israel's trying to target Hamas. So we don't know exactly what that math is right now, but the 10 to 1 figure that I explained makes this a very, very difficult equation to be sure.
Seth Moulton, thank you very much indeed.
All right, thank you.